little quiz, and we're going to go over it here now. All right, arrange the following New Testament characters in chronological order by numbering them 1 through 8, as though doing a New Testament timeline. Okay, who did you put for number 1?
I put John the Baptist, but it should have been Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Okay, Mary, the mother of Jesus, should be number 1 in this, yes. Okay, who'd you put 2?
Should have been John the Baptist.
That's John the Baptist, right. 3?
Jesus.
All right, those 3 should have been, if you're thinking, those 3 should have been pretty easy. Okay, number 4?
Simon Peter.
That's right. Okay, number 5?
John the Apostle.
That's correct. Number 6?
Stephen the martyr.
Right. 7?
Paul.
And number 8 then's Timothy. He's the one that's left. All right. Here comes Sarah. I'll let her sit down here with her paper, and we'll still go on through it. Okay. Okay, get you one of the little quizzes right there. Sign in and get one of the quizzes. Just get you one. And you can write the answers as we go through it here. Okay. Get you one and lay the others back over there. We're on the first page. Have you been ill?
Yes, ma'am, all day.
Oh boy. Well, I think we'll get through pretty early here tonight. So turn on the first page. We're on the bottom half of it. Okay, first page, the bottom half. All right, from the above list of characters, fill the blanks below, matching each person with the appropriate event or a description made. Who sang the Magnificat? Mary did, absolutely. Who gazed into heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus standing at the right hand? Stephen. Who was the one that was called the one whom Jesus loved? John, absolutely. Okay, John the Apostle. Who was stricken blind on the road to Damascus?
Paul.
Who was given his name, which means rock, from Jesus? Peter. Who cursed the tree and caused it to die next day? Jesus did. Who became a pastor of the church at Ephesus? Timothy. Who was beheaded by Herod? John the Baptist. Okay, what 3 books are included in the synoptic gospels? Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the synoptics. Okay, true and false on the second page. Jesus' first miracle was the raising of Lazarus from the dead. That's false. What was his first miracle? Wine. The wine, absolutely. Paul possibly wrote the book of Hebrews. That's true, and there's a possibly there because there's a question mark as to who really wrote the book of Hebrews. The languages used by all New Testament writers were Hebrew and Chaldee. That's false. What were they? Okay, Hebrew and Greek. The New Testament is arranged in chronological order. That's false. The book of Acts is a book of New Testament history. That is true. List 7 authors of the New Testament.
Matthew, John, Mark, Luke, John the Apostle, Paul, Peter, and James.
All right, and then you have Jude if you thought of Jude. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Paul, James, Peter, Jude. Okay. Okay. I ask you, what are your expectations of this course? First, let me ask you, since all three of you were in the last one, I enjoyed the comments and the grading at the end of your test. That's always interesting to me. Was the life and ministry of Christ what you expected from that course?
It was more. It was more.
Okay. It was kind of what you expected out of the course. Okay, what do you expect out of this course?
Well, I got a chance to look at the book, and I'm like,
You're not sure what you expect out of the text, but we'll talk about it in just a minute, okay? When we get to the other stuff, we'll talk about the textbook. Okay. All right. Okay. The first little bit in this one, we will, since you were in Life and Ministry of Christ, some of the very first part of it you will know. I'm going to ask if you'll come get this. I've got my mic on here, and give everyone one of the lesson syllabus. Okay. New Testament survey. Survey means, and I wrote you an explanation there, but basically to make a general study of it. We know when they come out and survey something, what they do, they get the boundaries and so forth in it, so you know what a survey is. So that basically explains to you what we'll be doing here. The purpose of this course, always when we study, is to hide God's word in our heart. David said, hide the word in the heart, might not sin against you. Study to show ourselves approved, and always to have a correct answer. To understand in the New Testament what was anticipated in the Old Testament. Your general information, of course, it's the Friday sessions from 5 until we get through. Normally they put 7:45 here. They give you a little longer break than we usually take, so I would say anywhere between 7:30 normally. Okay, it'll be 12 weeks, which is 24 class sessions, but we're going to do 22 class sessions and have a final exam. The course includes 22 sessions. I'm going to give you 2 tests within that, and then there will be the extra projects and your final exam. Your projects, your outside work. Of course, you do have a textbook, and when we finish this, we'll talk about it for just a moment. New Testament survey by Merrill Tenney. And of course, the Bible is always the textbook in here. But I want you to read each New Testament book as we go along with your text and with each lesson as we do the lesson in the lesson syllabus. Okay, your first project is called My Gospel. Write a gospel or good news message from your perspective based on your personal experience with Jesus. You may write it as a small book, a scroll, or a letter. Make it at least 5 pages typed, double-spaced, and illustrated. You may illustrate with pictures, designs, poetry, colorful illustrations, or even the project itself can be an illustration. Make your gospel interesting. Your gospel should include your salvation experience, the people, places, or things that influenced you, a description of your walk with Jesus until now, any personal experiences, miracles, or supernatural events you have experienced in your life. Your good news message to the world. Don't be legalistic with this assignment. Have fun with it. Your second one, or third one, write an epistle to the church. An epistle means letter. This is to be a brief assignment of what you consider important to be written to the church at this time. It's a short one, 1 or 2 pages typed, double-spaced, and a cover sheet. This letter may either be personal, it can be a corporate one to the church, or it can be doctrinal. Okay? Give serious thought to this assignment. What would you say to the church now? As to the due dates, they're on your lesson syllabus on the next page for each of these. As you can tell, tonight we're doing the course introduction, and we will start on the Synoptic Gospels. We have a part 1, 2, 3 of that, and then we'll do the Gospel of John, and then we'll do lesson proclaiming the new covenant. I have videos of Acts that we're going to watch as the teaching for Acts. They are very, very good, and you will enjoy having a break and having the videos in there. As you can tell, on session 7, Project My Gospel is due on session 7. Then you can tell where we have the tests and go into the others and look at session 17. You will find your epistle due. And the reason I did not put dates out there is this being on Friday nights, we have interference. As next week we won't have class because we have the conference. We also have Easter coming up with Good Friday before that. I think school is out. Do you know if it is out the week before Easter? Is that their holidays? Wondered if it was. And then we also have an anniversary Sunday for the church coming up, which Pastor is thinking about including a whole weekend event in that. So we'll see what that does to our Fridays and our dates. So that's the reason I had the sessions listed through all 22, so you can go by the sessions as we get there. And as you know, there's 2 sessions every night. So rather than we start with tonight's date, but you will have to work the dates as they come up. But you can go by the sessions that where we are. Okay, well, you've got your textbook there. We're going to talk about it for just a moment, along with your lesson syllabus. It's a very, very good book. We can tell that the author began the book with social and political and economic and religious backgrounds of the New Testament, and we hit a lot of that when we had the life and ministry of Christ. So you can read what he has in here, which will add to what we already have. But a lot of this you should know because we did cover a lot of it in our life and ministry of Christ classes that you had. So basically, where we will start our lessons for in here, we'll actually start in part 2, the Gospels and so forth, which is on page 126 or 7, I think. 129, actually. .129 is where we will actually start our lesson part of it. It talks here about the name the New Testament, and the Greek term it says actually meant a last will or testament. And we know that in order to have a last will and testament read, somebody had to die, didn't they? For you to hear the last will and testament. So here's what this is. It also talks about the term covenant that is used, the new covenant and the old covenant. And if you will look on page 130, turn to page 130, and about the middle of that top paragraph where it starts, the New Testament then is the record of the character and establishment of a new dealing of God with men through Christ. God sets the terms. Man can accept or reject them, but cannot alter them. And when man accepts them, both he and God are obligated to fulfill their requirements. The Old Covenant involved a revelation of the holiness of God in a righteous standard of law that those who received it were solemnly enjoined to keep. The New Covenant embodies a revelation of the holiness of God in an utterly righteous Son who empowers those who receive the revelation to become sons of God by making them righteous. So this tells you some about the New Testament and Old Testament. It also goes into the content and goes more into it, gives you some background for The Gospels, if you turn to page 137, it actually starts with the Gospels as literary works, and it talks about them in that light. It talks about the Synoptic Gospels, and we'll hit that in a minute. I have a paper I'm going to give you, and so we'll talk about that. But this part of your book is for right now, and then on page 149, it will start the Gospels individually with Matthew, of course. So when you get to that part of your book, I think what you were reading was the first part with the background of the social and the economic, the religious, and all the political, and all of it. And it will be good if you read that, because it will add to what we had already done in the other class. But specifically, make sure you start on the page 129 to read with your lessons, okay? So does that make you feel a little bit better about your text? Okay. I didn't choose the text. It was chosen before. But anyway, it is a good text. Has a lot of information to it. So I think once you get into it there, you will enjoy that part of it. Okay, are there any questions about your lesson syllabus and anything there? Think you understand all of it? And you can write the dates. As we have classes, you can write the dates of the classes there. Okay, we are going to, here's 3 more papers. And when I hate being hooked up here. I can't move. Okay. We're going to go over this as an introduction. And while you're up, I will hand you these others right here. And I think I will anyway. Let's see if this has got what I want in it back here. No, this one does. Okay, 1, 2, 3. There you go. Okay, the one with the rainbow on it. Have your pencils out because I want you to write a few things on this page. This is kind of an introduction here. And as you can see, it has the Old Testament, the 400 years, and the New Testament that we discussed before. Okay, I have under number 1, under the Old Testament, is an account of a nation, the Hebrew nation. This is a little bit of this will be kind of a review for you. Old Testament number 1 is an account of a nation, the Hebrew nation. Straight across under the 400 years, write the Dark Ages. And across from that, New Testament is account of a man, the Son of Man. Number 2, under Old Testament, write sets the stage. Means they're anticipating, looking forward to it. Everything is getting set in order. Number 2, sets the stage. Skip the 400 years and right under New Testament, it describes it. Number 3, don't write anything under Old Testament. Go to the 400 years and write the prophets silent. And nothing under New Testament. Go to number 4. Prophecy of the coming Messiah under the Old Testament. Prophecy of coming Messiah. And go over to New Testament, the Messiah manifests. Number 5, under Old Testament, write Old Covenant. And go across to New Testament and write New Covenant. Number 6, under Old Testament, write hope. And New Testament, write fact. It became a fact. They had a hope and it became a fact. All right, New Testament facts. I want you to write this sentence. This is the part of the Bible written about and after. This is the part of the Bible written about and after God sent His Son to live upon the earth. Another sentence. It is God's message of His great love for us told through Jesus. It is God's message of His great love for us told through Jesus, is what the New Testament is. With Scripture, John 3:16. It is God's message of His great love for us told through Jesus. John 3:16. Okay, I want you to make a note. I want you to know the New Testament books in order and spell correctly. Know the New Testament books in order and spell correctly. And especially get them as we go through and study them. Add to. We'll go through and categorize the New Testament's books in just a moment. Okay, these books, if you want to put this note on there, these books were not written in the order in which they are presented in our Bible. They're not chronological. The books were not written in the order in which they are presented in the Bible. The epistles of Paul were probably the first written. The epistles of Paul were probably the first ones written. Okay, look at your diagrams that I gave you. The first one is like a gate or an entryway, the historical bridge. This designates the spanning the interval between the Old and the New Testament, and it gives you the years. The government of Palestine during that period is listed up here. The Persian, the Jewish, the special movements that they had, the religious parties. Talks about the Alexanders. If you look on one post over here, 400 BC, it's the national factors are listed. The Persian, Grecian, Roman, and Jewish facts and government is listed on one post. The other side, events immediately preceding the advent or the coming of Jesus, the announcements, the Annunciation with Mary, and the preaching of John the Baptist heralding the coming of Jesus. History of the interval between the Old and New Testaments. The history of the interval between these testaments is often regarded by Bible students as of little importance because no divinely inspired prophets are supposed to have spoken during this period. It says here they're called the silent centuries. It's the 400 years of silence, the Dark Ages. There's several terms can be used there. Yet a knowledge of the leading events as well as the literature of the times is of great value because they furnish a background for the coming and life of Jesus. For 200 years after captivity in the province of Judah remained under Persian rule, and it goes to the conquest of Alexander the Great and the death of Alexander. And it says the latter was a dark period in Jewish history, especially during the reign of the Syrian king, who committed many outrages against the Jews, sought to establish idolatry in Jerusalem, and defiled the temple. Then it talks about the Maccabees, the Maccabean revolt that was there. And so this gives you a little bit of the history and what happened in the 400 years. We have to remember the Old Testament was looking forward to Jesus, to the Messiah. They looked forward. The 400 years in between, God was getting things ready. Even though there was no prophet or anything within that time, events were happening during that time. God's always moving. He's always doing and will accomplish his purposes. So during that time, he was arranging the time for the coming of Jesus. If you look on your next page, it has a river flowing through here, the river of inspiration, it says. And it lists the books and gives you also the 400 silent years in between them. And it divides the books up into their categories for you, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, go to your next page. The Old Testament and New Testament books, 400 silent years with Christ as the link in between, because as I said, things were getting ready for him in that time. All right, if you notice in the Old Testament, it says there was a longing for coming, and the New Testament is the realization. The Creator in Genesis and the Redeemer in the New Testament. The majestic God in the Old Testament and our Father. He became our Father in the New Testament. The first things were in the Old Testament, and we had the last things in the New Testament. Spiritual darkness in the Old Testament, and then we'll have Satan's defeat in the New Testament. Sin's curse and sin's remedy. We have death in the Old Testament, and we have life eternal, which is mentioned in the New Testament. Of course, they had the bloody sacrifices in the Old Testament. We have Christ the Lamb in the New Testament. Old Testament was bondage. We have liberty. They had the law. We had the gospel, the good news. They had types and shadows. We had the substance, the real thing. He's the real deal. All right? Then is it Coke or Pepsi? Who used to do that? Had the real deal. Had the real deal. Okay. They had outward ceremonies. We had the inward experience. They had the letter of the law. We had the spirit. They had prophecy. We had the fulfillment of that prophecy. They had the expected Messiah. We have the Savior. They had paradise lost when sin came into the world, and we have paradise regained. The next one is a stack of books, studying of the Bible as a whole by books. If you can read on the bottom book, the foundation, the gradual revelation and publication of the law is illustrated here. The first was written upon nature itself. And then it was written on conscience, man. We know that we are God's moral characters. We have a conscience. So it was written upon our conscience. And then there were the tablets of stone, the tables of stone that Moses did. And then the entire scriptures came. And then we had Christ as the illustrated edition here. And now we know now it's written on the heart. And then we have the outward Christian life, but we are to be what? Living epistles with it. It's written on the heart, but we're to be living epistles. So these are just some little diagrams which gives you idea of the breach between and reaching across from New Testament and Old Testament. I'm going to have to ask you to take these again, one of you. We're laying a foundation here tonight. First, on your first sheet, here's the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And as we said, it's from page 139 in your text. Synoptic means to be seen together from the Greek words. The three Gospels give us accounts of the same events with variations, different authors and written to different people, but variations, but some of the same events and accounts. These are sometimes put in parallel groups. If you've seen a chart of the Synoptic Gospels, they will list an event and then have, the scripture for each one. They're in parallel groups as they're listed in the Gospels. The Gospel of John is written on an entirely different plan. Comparisons of the Synoptic Gospels with John. The Synoptics contain an evangelistic message for unspiritual man. John contains a spiritual message for Christians. In the Synoptic Gospels, Jesus' Galilean ministry is covered. John covers the Judean ministry of Jesus. In the first three Gospels, Jesus' more public life is displayed. John shows Jesus' more private life. The first three talk of his humanity. John talks of his deity. And at the bottom, it's the same that we went through before with Matthew presents Jesus as king. Mark presents him as a servant. Luke presents Jesus as Son of God, his humanity. And John presented him as Son of God, his deity. The king, servant, Son of Man, Son of God. We know that Matthew wrote specifically to the Jews, and we'll talk more about Matthew later. We know the beloved physician was the only Gentile. He was the only non-Jew now, remember, as he wrote Luke. If you look at the next page, the books of the New Testament. Okay, they have them in categories here, and this is important for you to understand as we go through them. We have 4 books as biography, or it may be called history. Axis history, I'm sorry, I'm looking ahead. We have the 4 Gospels, and they are biographical books of Jesus, and of course John and others too. Okay, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, a book of history, which is Acts. And then there are 21 epistles. 13 of them are by Paul, which are the Pauline epistles, and then 8 general epistles. And I want you to look under the 13 Pauline epistles and draw you a little line for 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Those are pastoral epistles. 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, and Titus. Even though they are Pauline epistles, they are pastoral epistles. Of course, there are 8 general epistles then, and prophecy is Revelation. Old Testament, we knew had 39 books. New Testament has 27 books, covers about 100 years, and it has 8 known authors. Your next page will list your authors, the writer, and the books that we have. And if you'll notice the question mark by Hebrews down there, but you have 8 known authors. All right? And those will be easier for you to study and have to go through also. One more paper here, people. And we're just going straight through these tonight because we have some that are going to have to play catch up. Okay, this is the Synoptic Gospels, Part 1. We termed it God with Us. We're going to fill in the blanks as we go through. The period of time between the Old and New Testament is known as the Dark Ages, or the, what did we say? 400 silent years, right. Old and New Testaments, 400 silent years. There are 27 books written by at least 8 authors. Four books of biography, 1 book of history, 13 Pauline epistles, 8 general epistles, 1 book of prophecy. Number 5, the major focus of the New Testament is the establishment of a new covenant where Jesus was sent as a supreme sacrifice to bear our sin, and thus helping us to obtain full fellowship with the Father and live a life of peace. And thus helping us to obtain full fellowship with the Father and live a life of peace. The first 4 books of the New Testament give accounts from the life of Jesus and are called Gospels, which means good news. We just said that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are called synoptic. Because they give summaries of the events and life of Jesus. These 3 highlight his Galilean ministry. Number 8, the last is John, which reveals the private life of Jesus and reveals the deity of Jesus more clearly than any of the others. This book, as we said before, highlights his Judean ministry. Two genealogies. Which books were they in? Matthew and Luke, all right. The 2 genealogies in the New Testament, one in Matthew showing the lineage of Joseph, the one in Luke, the lineage of Mary. Number 10, 400 years of silence was broken by John the Baptist as he prepared the way of the Lord. Really, if we want to look at the prophetic being returning, we could say it was broken by when the angels appeared to Mary and then through Zacharias and Elizabeth, and there were prophetic words and songs, but actually the one that went forth as a prophet was John the Baptist. So you understand that, okay? It was broken by John the Baptist as he prepared the way of the Lord. Of course, we know the birth and adolescence of Jesus is only recorded in Matthew and Luke. Number 12, Zacharias and Elizabeth were the parents of John the Baptist. Number 13, after Mary learns of her destiny as the mother of the Messiah, she sings a song called the Magnificat. And the reason it is called that, it begins with, "My soul magnifies the Lord." So it's called the Magnificat, from magnifies. My soul magnifies the Lord. Number 14, Mary and Joseph were told by the angel to name their son Jesus, which means Jehovah is salvation. We know that Luke 2:52 says Jesus increased first in wisdom, stature, and favor with God and man. That means mentally, physically, and then in favor with God and man, socially. Okay, I said our class was going to be short tonight because some of them are not here. I was giving you foundation, giving you a little idea of where the class is going, give you your lesson syllabus so you can start there. And are there any questions about anything right now?
Number 3.
On what we just did?
Yes. A period of New Testament of how many years?
Okay, let me see here just a minute. I laid my paper back in here. Okay, number 3, 100 years. Mm-hmm. Okay. Any comments or anything right now? Okay, Pamela, you can cut that off. That guy walks in the spirit. What do you